Welcome to the Anointed Ones. When you engage your true power, you don't just develop. You destabilize ecosystems that rely on your quiet. Take a pause and breathe. That's in. Because right now, somewhere in the group chats, the dark corners of people's thoughts, and the tongues of those who claim to know you, your name is trending, not on Twitter, but in the domain of the uncomfortable. And you understand what they are saying. You changed. But first, let's clear things up. You haven't merely changed. You changed dates, rewrote contracts, and regained control of a life that had been monitored by organizations that had no business being there in the first place. And now many are unsure how to behave. They look at your light as if it were a swindle. The other side looks at your confidence as if it were criminal. They're guessing that you joined some secret organization when in reality, you just left the one in which they were inadvertently ensnared. In fact, psychologists believe that when you transform your identity via profound healing or spiritual awakening, others around you may suffer bewilderment or even loss because their impression of you is linked to who you were when you served their comfort zone. So no, it's not all in your brain. They are behaving differently. They're chatting behind your back. They are analyzing you as if you were a case study. But here's the joke. While they're chatting about your alteration, you're accessing a timeline in which their thoughts don't even register. So brace up, because in this video, we'll look at the true reason people are murmuring, guessing, fretting, and projecting. Since you regained your spiritual power, and believe me, it has nothing to do with arrogance, but rather with harmony. Let's go deep. Number 1, you haven't changed. You dismantled a fake persona that made people feel comfortable. You did not change. You have just collapsed. A fictitious persona that made everyone else feel comfortable. That version of you never existed. It was a survival costume made from years of training, remorse, people-pleasing, and trying not to upset the status quo. That previous version smiled when they broke boundaries, remained silent to maintain peace, laughed at unfunny jokes, and accepted relationships that drained your life. Let's be honest, people liked that version of you because it was simple to manipulate, predictable, and gave them a sense of control. Now that you've chosen truth above tolerance, alignment, approbation, and peace, they're scrambling, not because you did anything wrong, but because they don't know how to use you anymore. Your metamorphosis did not harm them. It revealed how they had benefited from your quiet and emotional work. You're no longer accessible to play therapist, scapegoat, savior, or background figure, and this has people trembling. You've gotten more honest, not harsher. You are not chilly. You just cease setting yourself on fire to make everyone else warm. Whispers that you've changed are often a ruse to conceal the fact that you're no longer controllable. They missed the version of you that shrank to make others feel taller, apologized for merely existing, and went to great lengths to prevent others from leaving. However, that version was a performance. This is the one. This version is raw, rooted, and unabashedly genuine, and people don't know how to handle it. They only know how to digest your previous, more appealing, watered-down version. So, let them conjecture. Let them ponder. Allow them to speak. Your spirit did not pass through hell and return to smallness. You did not overcome the internal conflicts alone to remain appealing to those who like impersonating you. You dismantled the persona they could control, and now you're going into one they can't touch. That is not arrogance. That is liberty. You did not change. You eventually showed up, and the real you is no longer interested in fitting in. You came to change rooms, not blend into them. Second, your new timeline does not need permission to be radical. Your new chronology does not need permission to be radical. It does not wait for applause, reassurance, or a roundtable discussion of viewpoints before proceeding. This version of you no longer asks, "Is this all right?" before taking up space. You are not here to be nice about your breakthrough. You're not tiptoeing anymore. You're taking complete steps toward a future free of other people's expectations. Previously, you would make yourself digestible, less intense, less passionate, and less focused in order to avoid making others uncomfortable with your ambition, insight, and brightness. You are now completely aware of what you're carrying. You're done explaining yourself to those who just speak survival. You're done giving up your power for the sake of peace. You don't need a support group to legitimize what you're doing right now. It is heavenly teaching. And when you follow heavenly guidance, you begin to move in ways that irritate the stagnant, confound the average, and frighten the controlling. Radical does not mean loud. It signifies genuine. It entails trusting oneself so much that you cease waiting for others to agree. It entails understanding when it's time to walk away, without drama, but with clarity. It entails making judgments that may make others doubt your sanity until they see the effects. Then you suddenly become courageous and inspirational. But let us be honest. They only label you radical when they are unable to manage you. When you start trusting your intuition above their views, you become unpredictable in their system. And whatever they can't foresee, they attempt to classify as too far off or altered. You are not going to change your return. Returning to the core of who you were before the world persuaded you to tone it down. And in your new environment, being unapologetic is not an option. It is a must. You did not come here to repeat cycles, water yourself down, or keep requesting admittance to chambers your spirit has outgrown. You came to rewrite rules, disrupt patterns, and totally embrace your mission. This isn't just a new version of you. This is you, with spiritual clearance and internal support. You are no longer waiting for authorization. You are the permission. Number 3, people believe you changed because they identified you as a character in their tale. They claim you've changed, but what actually occurred was this. You've stopped playing the role they created for you. You were not simply in their lives. You were cast in a certain role that made their tale easier to follow. Perhaps you were the trustworthy one, the soft-spoken one, the person who has never said no. Alternatively, they might transfer their fears onto someone without being challenged. As long as you remained inside that character, they felt relaxed. You were simple to handle, reliable, and familiar, yet something inside you began to awaken. You've ceased performing. You began asking questions. You stopped answering yes when you meant no. You stopped making yourself accessible for any emotional crisis that wasn't yours to handle. And now they are uneasy, not because you are poisonous, but because you no longer fit into the position they created for you. What they're calling change is actually your reluctance to continue pretending you didn't rewrite the script to be tough. You recognize there was a screenplay in the first place, but it wasn't written by you. That image of you they preferred was curated, edited, filtered, and tightly policed by your fear of rejection and need to belong. They don't know how to react now that you've restored your authenticity, since you're not behaving like the role. You aren't keeping the tale moving. You've left the stage, and they're now lost in a story that can't continue without your participation. The fact is that they never truly knew you. They saw you as someone who was emotionally bargaining simply to survive their idea of love, friendship, or family. They are now staring at someone they cannot foresee, guilt, or shape, and that is horrifying for them. It challenges the very core of the tale they created around your vulnerability. They were unprepared for your might. So, no, you have not changed. You've just quit playing the role. They needed to keep their own dysfunction going smoothly. And now that you're finally living as your true self, they realize they've never had a connection with your soul, just with your silence. Fourth, you earn power by eventually withdrawing assent from every energetic falsehood. You earned authority when you stopped co-signing energetic falsehoods, not by raising your voice or demanding titles, but by calmly and firmly withdrawing your assent. You stopped nourishing relationships based on guilt. You ceased consenting to dynamics that seemed like a spiritual contract made under duress. You stopped engaging in habits that sapped your essence in order to preserve the peace. That choice didn't just alter your behavior. It altered your whole energy signature. Your strength stemmed from your rejection, the unwillingness to continue pretending, the reluctance to continue acting tiny so that others might feel large, the reluctance to negotiate with energies who had no right to be at your table in the first place. This was not rebellion. It was a silent rebellion for truth. You did not ask for a crown. You reclaimed the power that was always yours. But buried behind years of indoctrination and emotional debt, when you established those internal boundaries that no one could see but everyone could sense, something changed. You blasted shock waves through previous agreements, karmic cycles, and societal contracts that had never been aligned in the first place. People began to drop off, not because you pushed them, but because the expired contracts couldn't keep themselves together once you stopped giving them your energy. You were the power source the whole time. They were just surviving on electricity. You didn't even realize you were providing. And now you're walking differently. You communicate with a clarity that makes others nervous. Not because you are better, but because you are liberated. You no longer bear the unseen burden of everyone else's expectations. You don't seek approval since you know how much it cost you the previous time around. And that authority, inner calm, and unwillingness to sell your soul in modest doses. It glows not loudly, but clearly. They are not upset with your progress. They are shocked that you have recovered sovereignty over your soul, and they are no longer permitted to function in it. You did not just level up. You shut down the whole old system. Number 5, they can no longer manage you since you are difficult to foresee or control. You used to be someone they could figure out. You'd shrink as the strain increased. To prevent a quarrel, you would soften your statements. You'd question your own truth to preserve someone else's ego. You were simple to control since you were always anticipating other people's emotions before following your own impulses. But not anymore. Now you're leaving a location they don't comprehend. A location that does not depend on permission, popularity, or tradition. You stopped reacting from fear and began responding from frequency. Your choices are not based on what makes sense to them. They are based on what connects with your soul. That's why people are alarmed. You are not live in response to their emotions, manipulation, or expectations. You are listening to something greater. You are following a deep knowledge. That makes you unpredictable to individuals who only feel safe when they have control over the result or the person. They don't know what to do with you anymore since you don't react like you used to. Their regular guilt trips don't work. The passive hostility doesn't bother you. The quiet does not shake you. You've gone beyond their emotional authority, and they can't reach you via the same channels anymore. You're not following survival scripts. You are now living on spiritual software. To them, you've become tough. But, basically, you've merely developed discernment. You're not readily accessible. You aren't easily moved. You're not easily duped into shrinking yourself for anyone's benefit. You've left the linear grid and entered something quantum, a region where your intuition guides your bounds and your presence communicates without the need for proof. People who depend on predictability and emotional leverage can't take it. Not because you're being unkind, but because you're no longer accessible for their notion of connection, which was really control disguised. You are not mean. You are sovereign. You are not arrogant. You're in agreement. You no longer belong to their outdated maps. You're creating new ones in real time. And that scares the folks who believe they knew everything about you. Number 6, you're being investigated as a phenomena since your frequency is no longer consistent with anything familiar. You've evolved into something that no one can describe, which fascinates and unnerves them. You did not proclaim your evolution. You embodied it. One day you were in the muck, barely alive, and the next you were strolling in serenity, gleaming with clarity and doing gestures that did not make sense in nature. They are now analyzing your stance, words, stillness, and radiance as if you were a scientific experiment. Because your frequency no longer matches what they're accustomed to. You did not take the customary way. You did not beg for a place at the table. You did not fight for recognition or wait to be recognized. You disappeared from their story and reappeared with vigor. They couldn't trace. That alone altered their perception of who you were. How did you manage it without them? How did you rise without their approval? How could you be at peace when everything in your history suggests you should still be broken? Your aura is now unreadable since it is not based on ego. It is programmed for survival. So, refining and divine alignment. You've ceased performing. You stopped wasting energy on meaningless chats. You stopped being emotionally open to tales based on guilt and misrepresentation. And now they have no idea how to read you since all of their previous strategies bounce off of you. You're not just unidentifiable, you're untouchable. People aren't just watching. They are obsessive, not out of love, due of misunderstanding, out of discomfort. You breached an unseen rule. You climbed without being selected by them. You healed without their assistance. You entered authority without external authorization. They're looking for the cheat code, but there isn't one. You did not climb a ladder. You have exited the building. You did not win the game. You've quit playing totally. And that is the part they can't bear. Your liberation reveals their cage. Your stillness reveals their loudness. Your brilliance makes people wonder what they are doing with their own light. So they treat you like a phenomena, because they understand deep down that what you carry cannot be taught, controlled, or replicated. It can only be gained. And you earned it in the dark when no one was looking. Number 7. This is not confidence. It is an internal court decision in your favor. This is not confidence. This is the spirit of someone who is already before the highest court, the one inside, and obtained a definitive decision. I am not guilty of the falsehoods that have been projected upon you. Not responsible for the roles they compelled you to perform. Not guilty of shame, guilt, blame, or false narratives. You have been on trial your whole life. Judged, scrutinized, and misinterpreted. But the verdict is in, and you've been exonerated. What others see as arrogance is truly your release. You are no longer wandering about attempting to establish your innocence. You're no longer shrinking to evade the judgment. You confronted the allegations that had been ingrained in your mind by others and destroyed each one with truth. You understood that you don't have to apologize to anybody for being entire, smart, surviving, or progressing. You walk differently today, not because you believe you are superior, but because you are no longer bent down by an unseen weight. You are not demonstrating humility in order to make people feel comfortable. You're not over-explaining your decisions or overcompensating for how much you've recovered. That offends those who are still in emotional debt to themselves, who have never given themselves permission to succeed. So they call your clarity arrogant. They call your limits harsh. They misinterpret your centeredness for superiority because they have yet to experience true freedom. The fact is that they are still in court, defending their value, and hoping for a jury of people who would validate or applaud them. But you dismissed the jury. You threw out the case. You walked out of the courthouse and never looked back. And now your presence reminds them that although freedom is attainable, it comes at a cost. They are unwilling to give up the tale of their pain. So no, it is not confidence. It's over. It's finished. It is spiritual authority, born of profound, lonely, unseen fights that no one cheered for. And those who misinterpret it are not your judges. They're merely seeing what it's like when someone eventually walks in shackles. Number 8. You outgrew situations in which acting small was the implicit social pact. You did not just leave past settings. Rather, you grew beyond them. You didn't bang doors or cause commotion. You simply stopped performing in an environment where the implicit rule was, don't shine too brightly, don't speak too boldly, and don't develop too quickly. You played along for quite some time. You made yourself smaller so that others could feel larger. You understated your abilities so as not to terrify the insecure. You watered down your efforts not because you lacked strength, but because you didn't want to create noise. That was not humility. It was about survival. But something changed. You realized how much it was costing you to stay in rooms where your light had to be lowered in order to be approved. You came to understand that the so-called peace you were preserving was really simply calm submission. You were never really free in such environments. You were only tolerated as long as you kept inside the boundaries they established for you. When you began pushing those boundaries, your energy altered. They claim you've changed, but they are actually yearning for control. They lament their capacity to foresee, shape, and emotionally confine you. They didn't adore the real you. They preferred the version of you who validated their anxieties. You used to gaslight yourself in order to keep them comfortable. Now you don't. That is what people are responding to. Not a betrayal. Liberation. They are unpleasant. Not because you're gone, but because your freedom serves as a reminder that they continue to choose imprisonment. You did not leave anybody behind. You just stopped crawling to remain in locations where you were supposed to fly. You didn't cut anybody off. You grew to the point when their access expired. The version of yourself that required permission does not exist anymore. The social contract is null and invalid unless that version is included. You're neither arrogant or harsh. You're just clear. Clarity frightens those who depend on your uncertainty to keep them comfortable. You aren't shrinking anymore. And that alone is the most powerful statement you will ever make. Number 9. The version of you that they overlooked never existed. It was a survival scheme. They claim they mourn the old you, But what they really miss is their control over you. That is the version they are weeping over. The person who smiled through pain, suppressed their feelings, and softened every fact in order to keep the room peaceful. That was not you. That was a survival scheme. That version was created out of need, not authenticity. You weren't forced to be so pleasant, accommodating, or silent. You were trained to scan the room for danger, gauge the emotional climate, and adapt yourself such that no one felt intimidated by your reality. They described you as calm, but you were really on emotional lockdown. They called it sweet because you calculated every word so no one exploded. You didn't have the freedom to be despised, misunderstood, or condemned, so you played the part that made others feel safe, even if it cost you your serenity. And now that you've stopped doing that, you've disassembled the inner machinery that had you stuck in performance mode. They're uncomfortable. They are not in grief over you. They are lamenting the loss of access. They're missing the version of you who absorbed attention so they didn't have to feel it. The one who kept the environment calm, even if it meant suppressing your own inclinations. They missed the surrender, which they misunderstood for benevolence. However, you would never genuinely agree with them. You were surviving them. You were not seeking peace. You were avoiding punishment. That was not a connection. Your silence resulted in a one-sided transaction. Now you're speaking up. Now you hesitate before consenting. Now you can say no without feeling guilty. They call it an attitude shift, a glow-up, or a change. But it's really a return. A return to your true self, before the world informed you who you needed to be in order to survive. You're not cruel anymore. You are simply no longer accessible for emotional discussions that involve your treachery. They didn't adore the real you. They admired how skillfully you vanished. The most freeing thing is that you don't have to explain it to anybody, since the real you was never gone. It was just waiting for the concert to conclude. Number 10. You are now functioning from a line of code that they do not have access to. You're not behaving strangely. You've just tapped into a level of consciousness that is not dependent on operating systems many individuals depend on. You are no longer moved by fear, the urge to fit in, or the need to be understood. You move from something higher, something ancient and holy, inscribed deep in your soul like sacred code, and those who can't decipher it believe you've lost your way, but you've only vacated their map. Your decisions are no longer understandable to people who want everything to be reasonable, safe, and explainable. You no longer follow the previous scripts. You do not seek permission from the same areas. You don't ask for instructions from those who have never ventured to escape their mental prisons. And this upsets them, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they can no longer foresee you. People who used to be able to manage, manipulate, or measure you are now unable to understand you. You stopped wondering what will people think, and began wondering, what does my spirit know? You do not take action because it is trendy or trending. You move because your in is tuned to heavenly wisdom, which propelled you ahead in ways GPS does not communicate. It whispers, and only those who have completed the interior excavation may hear it. They don't recognize it. But when they say you've changed, what they actually mean is that you've developed beyond our knowledge, and your upgrades have upset their systems. You no longer respond to the emotional frequencies that used to reach you via shame, guilt, peer pressure, or dread of being alone. You outgrown the access points. You got spiritually encrypted. You are not invisible because you have vanished. You are invisible because your vibration has shifted. They can no longer detect you in the same frequency ranges as before. They're looking for a signal that no longer exists since you updated the whole motherboard of your existence. And it was not about getting well. It was about finally achieving alignment. You're not escaping from the world. You're moving in harmony with something bigger. So, no, you aren't lost. You are just no longer traceable by systems that are built to manage rather than comprehend. A number. Your article seems strange to people who cannot operate without turmoil. Your peace does not resemble surrender. Those hooked to loudness see it as rebellion. Those who define aliveness by how frenetic things seem. Those who believe turmoil is a personality trait and drama is the lifeblood of connection. So when you stop responding, when you stop getting into every argument, guilt trip, and emotional trap, they didn't perceive any progress. They perceived a barrier, distance, and a threat to individuals who only knew how to exist in dysfunction. Your calmness is strange. Your quiet makes them uneasy, not because you are chilly, but because they are unable to coexist without fighting. They mistake tranquility with punishment because, in their world, silence always signals the arrival of a storm. However, with you, things are different. Your article is not a warning. It is a border. It is the product of clarity. It's what occurs when someone finally stops wasting energy in locations where nothing grows. You are not disengaged. You're just no longer available for discussions that go round in circles, for apologies that never lead to change, for emotional ping-pong matches that only serve to empty you. You're not here to cure what refuses to be healed. You are not here to do emotional CPR on those who are determined to remain unconscious. That disturbs those who used to depend on your constant availability, who used to live on your emotional responses, explanations, and efforts to preserve the peace while they start fires. They claim you've changed. They now claim you have an attitude, but in reality, you have just stopped fueling chaos with your attention. You've stopped treating dysfunction as if it was your obligation to calm it. You've quit disturbing your own tranquility in order to preserve fake harmony. That's what's making them itchy. Not because you're harsh, but because they can't influence what they can't cause. Your quiet is powerful. It is a subtle insurrection. It states, I will not dance with dysfunction simply because you are uncomfortable in your own silence. And for those who adore noise, who define themselves via confrontation, and who depend on your emotions to legitimize their games, your essay has the feeling of exile, yet it is not. It's called evolution. A number. You aren't rebranding. You are reclaiming. You are not putting on a new mask. You'll finally take the old ones off. This is not some flashy rebranding designed to dazzle outsiders. This is a spiritual reclaiming of the authentic self. The portions that were buried behind shame, silence, ancestral guilt, and emotional survival. The version of you people see right now is not the new you. It is the original. You are returning from exile. For many years, you were broken. You've left bits of yourself behind. Every time you said yes, you meant no. Every time you quieted your soul to maintain tranquility. Every time you molded yourself to meet the dysfunction around you. You were not living. You were compensating and performing, negotiating with chambers that just appreciated your compliance. You wore roles rather than identities. You sacrificed your own well-being to ensure the comfort of others. But something in you jolted awake. Not in fury, but rather in awareness. You began gathering fragments of your soul strewn by previous choices, relationships, and false duties. The voice you hushed returned. The dreams you buried reappeared. But the standards you lowered started to increase. And now, instead of establishing a life based on acceptance, you're focusing on alignment. They believe it's a phase. They call it ego. They murmur that you are attempting to be someone you are not. But they're mistaken. You are not performing. You are remembering. And what you're remembering disturbs those who have come to terms with forgetting themselves. You did not aspire to impress. You advanced because being stagnant became too costly. You're not after aesthetics. You're pursuing integration. You're not bragging. You are finally and unabashedly showing up. Trends do not give you a radiant complexion. It stems from the truth. And truth attracts the aligned while scaring the spiritually bereft. That is why some people see your progress as a kind of aggression. They feel exposed because your fullness shows their own avoidance. They call your healing hubris since they can no longer control you due to your wounds. You aren't rebranding. You are repairing. You are not seeking applause. You're walking with authority. And the reason they can't handle you right now is because you're no longer a part of their tale. You are writing your own. And this time, you are the author, not the performer. A number. You became a mirror, revealing what they were avoiding. Your development did not make you a danger. It transformed you into a mirror, not the sort that people appreciate for its beauty or charm, but the kind that reflects back everything they've been trying to avoid. You did not provoke or disrespect them. You have just become clear. And this clarity transformed you into a live truth detector. Now, just being, standing in your genuine self, reveals what they've hidden. People do not always dislike you for who you are. They despise how they feel about themselves while they're with you. Your presence reminds them of the task they have not completed, the mending they avoided, the standards they lowered. You become a subtle but brilliant light in a room full of individuals who had grown used to the darkness. And that light does not ask questions. It just discloses. You did not beg them to alter. However, when you began walking with integrity, they felt judged by the disparity. You become proof of what is possible, which is perilous for those who have persuaded themselves that survival is the limit. You began to choose peace above performance bounds, truth-based approbation, and outward praise. And it shattered the fantasy they were hanging on to. It was not about you getting well. It was about your bravery. They are braver than the version of themselves that gave up long ago. That is why people call you intense. Why do they gossip? Why did they isolate themselves? Because when you express your truth without malice, smile without the need for validation, and walk away without explanation, they understand they are still bargaining with individuals you have outgrown. They're still attempting to appease systems you've disconnected from. You are not triggering them. They have been triggered for years. You simply happened to be the one who pointed out that their mask was sliding. You become the unsaid inquiry. Why haven't you confronted yourself yet? Most individuals would prefer despise the mirror than undertake their inner work. But it is not your weight to bear. You are not here to make people feel comfortable in their denial. You're here to mirror reality. And that is not arrogance. It's an alignment. Your authority is quiet, but it is creating a sound in the spiritual sphere. Your authority does not come with a spotlight, a crowd, or a title, but it is causing fundamental changes. You don't need to declare your authority since your presence already does. You've entered a period in which your actions speak louder than any words. The way you move, decide, detach, and maintain your serenity. It's all a frequency now, a vibration that the spiritual world detects before you ever speak. You aren't only walking differently. You stroll with heavenly authority. That's what changes everything. The previous version of you was waiting to be selected, chosen, and confirmed. However, that version died peacefully when you found the throne wasn't there. It was inside. You stopped asking to sit at tables where your soul never fit and instead created your own, with contracts written in truth rather than pain. People believe that silence indicates that you have stepped back. However, in the spiritual arena, quiet is a tactic. It's a statement. It proves that you no longer need to beg or prove. Your alignment defines your authority, and your words are no longer motivated by ego. It stems from divine authority. You aren't striving to be heard. You are already influenced by forces that most people do not believe in. Your decisions are no longer dependent on reflexes. They are based on eyesight, on protocols that only your soul can understand. And saying no right now is not rebellion. It is protection. When you vanish, it is not a retreat. It's time to recalibrate. It is recognized by the spiritual realm. That is why taking action causes things to move behind the scenes. Why do doors open without you knocking? Why do certain individuals leave your life without warning? It is not rejection. It is spiritual housekeeping. The invisible world is reacting to your current rank. You don't need applause. You don't need a crowd. You do not need to be understood. Because what's going on is greater than invisibility. It's about vibration. And your frequency is no longer heard in the background. It takes center stage in the most important locations, where angels move, contracts adjust, and invisible fights are won for you. That is true authority, quiet to the world, yet tremendous in the soul. So now they murmur, "You've changed." Let them. That comment is not an accusation. This is an unintended confirmation. It implies that the magic has been broken and the mask has vanished. The performance has concluded. You haven't merely changed. You have returned. You did not rise to impress the world. You rose to retrieve what the world attempted to bury. You stopped requesting permission from broken systems. You stopped watering dead soil only to demonstrate your allegiance. You stopped shrinking to fit into spaces that needed your quiet to feel comfortable. And that silent reluctance to expose oneself again. That's where your newfound authority originated. Let them speculate. Allow them to speak. They aren't witnessing your demise. They are watching your upgrading. Your quiet is not the same as passivity. Your separation is not bitterness. Your shine is not arrogance. It's all indication that you've transitioned to spiritual leadership. You've now signed so many level contracts, which are not written in ink, but rather in frequency. You've left timelines that depended on your bewilderment to live. You didn't just move differently. You got higher. That transformation is more than simply personal. It is prophetic. You've become a living contradiction to all narratives. That being said, you wouldn't make it unless you played little. Performance served as a spiritual interruption to every illusion that claimed you had authority. This is not a phase. It is a beautiful reintroduction. So stroll in your clarity, your judgment, and your tranquil sun. You don't have to explain a frequency that they never listened into. Allow your life to be the message, the play. Be the protest and your totality. Be the evidence that you are not becoming. You have arrived. Every dimension understands this. If this message speaks to your soul, do not keep it to yourself. Go ahead. Also, please like this video so that it might reach someone else who needs it. Subscribe to this channel. If you know you're on a higher road and want more real, profound, and soul-level truth like this, remark below. Please let me know which section struck you the most or what you're reclaiming this season. If you feel called, your narrative may open up new possibilities for others. Share this with a friend, a fellow chosen one, or even someone who is awakening but does not yet have the vocabulary to express their feelings. Be the light, mirror, and validation they didn't realize they needed. You're not just viewing a video. You are uniting with a movement. Let us create this community of enlightened spirits together. I will see you at the next one. Powerful, silent, and unapologetically aligned. Stay blessed.